All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. I'm hosting the Mixed Mental Arts movie chat today with the woke centrist, of course, aka Dusty Cubes, aka Dustin Cubit, about that new documentary on Netflix that a lot of people have been talking about recently called The Social Dilemma, which is about concepts that a lot of people are already familiar with, I'm sure, which is that social media is making us junkies, all addicted to our phones and destroying our culture by turning us against each other and radicalizing us into drawing us to these like fringe communities online and all that sort of shit. So this will be interesting to talk about, especially given some of the aspects that Dusty and I have already talked about, like Jonathan Haidt is in there, for example, and talking about the consequences of social media addiction for teenagers, particularly teenage girls, and rising suicide rates. So, I guess this start off with what do you think about the movie in general, Dusty?
Wow. Um, it's crazy because it might be one of the most important documentaries that I've seen this year.
Yeah.
Because whether you like it or not, this affects everybody. It's not like a super partisan thing here.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like how they frame this documentary, and they really tell you what type of problems it has caused our culture. But I wish there was maybe a bit more scrutiny, perhaps, into like maybe some left wing fringe ideas, because I know they do go a little bit and they talk about QAnon and how misinformation is spread 6 times faster than the truth or factual information. And I know this to be true from both sides. Like, I've seen it from both sides. I think in the case of Breonna Taylor, there were a lot of people who didn't know that the warrant was a no-knock warrant.
Yeah.
Which means that the police actually had legal authority to enter the building without announcing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree that no-knock warrants should be a thing that don't exist, especially in pursuant of drug crime of all things.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
like, I'd understand if it was like a murderer who might have a family hostage or something, but usually in those cases, the police are called by an external factor. But yeah, no-knock warrants aren't really, they're super controversial. But getting back to the documentary, it's interesting and crazy that a lot of the experts that they talk to throughout this documentary were all like social media pioneers who had a lot of inside information about the business model that the social media companies follow and how they were actively pursuing persuasive, I'll put that in air quotes, persuasive technologies. But basically, their whole thing was to try to get you to use this technology more and more, to try to rope you in. And they are definitely, I would say they were definitely capitalizing on some human weaknesses. A couple that they pointed out was the gambling and slot machine effect.
Yeah.
People just want to see what the next thing is going to be. And it's always surprising, but usually it isn't. Like, if you just scroll through your news feed, you're just kind of waiting to see like the next big thing that's going to interest you.
Yep.
But
Sure. and
Yeah,
they didn't know, like, well, like I was thinking throughout these aspects of the documentary, be careful what you wish for, because they had no idea the monster that they were releasing. They didn't, like, they had the intention to manipulate people for sure, but they didn't know it was going to end up like radicalizing everyone and putting people into these fringe groups. Like how, for example, they talk about how how if you're like into one conspiracy theory, all of your YouTube suggestions will be for these other conspiracy theories, and if you're into flat Earth, it'll direct you to the 1,000 other people in the world who are also flat earthers, even though that's a tiny minority of the global population. And also, I wanted to say too, in terms of the Breonna Taylor case, there with that no knock warrant, I think I had heard that the cops, they just burst into the house, and then the guy there who had a gun reacted by shooting because he didn't know that they were cops, which kind of makes sense, right?
well, yeah, that's why he didn't get charged with anything. The
Yeah,
boyfriend who shot at the cops did not get charged with
right.
anything at all. And the cops didn't get charged with anything at all because they had, well, there was the one that got charged with reckless endangerment. This was the one cop who just started shooting randomly into the window. Um, and this is after like everything had happened. But the initial conflict, the cop was not charged for that because legally, whether it's morally right or wrong, he had the legal right to knock down the door and enter the apartment. And since he was being shot at, he had the legal authority to shoot back.
It's fucked up.
Yeah, it is. And people did get really upset over that, but just thinking about it, it was kind of, and it was an inevitable thing. You can't expect, you have to expect the court to follow the law. So when a lot of people see that these cops get off on these things, it's because that the cops are legally able to do these things. So you don't get mad at court results. What you have to do is you got to try to change the law. As they can go as long as they want. If and then most times the cops are going to get off. Like there's special exceptions
Yeah.
when you see cops like shooting people in the back from fleeing suspects.
I forget,
They
was what about that guy that shot George Floyd? I don't remember. Did he get prosecuted or not?
I think the case is still ongoing if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I don't think anybody's gotten off yet. As
Okay.
those guys are currently, yeah, the George Floyd case isn't completed yet.
Okay.
But there's probably going to be another riot when the cops
Wouldn't
get
surprise
off
me
on
at
that.
all. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah. I
Yeah.
well, I guess that's kind of off topic, but yeah, the in terms of the documentary, like you said, it's a very important one for right now, for sure, right? And like you and I have talked before about, like, one of the crucial aspects of this is getting us all addicted to our phones. And you and I have talked before about how we have both actively tried to reduce the amount we use our phones and social media. Like for example, I almost never check Facebook notifications anymore. I do check Twitter notifications, but I don't get very many of those. And um and I think I think that's about all I check for the most part. Like mostly what I use social media for is just posting stuff like workout videos and these podcasts and occasionally a picture of my dog or a sunset or something like that. And uh I made a rule for myself that I don't always follow. Like if I'm talking to some new hot girl that I've been talking to or something like that, I'll probably violate this rule, but I've made a rule for myself that I only respond to messages 4 times a day, and I do stick to that for the most part. It saves a lot of time. Like you never realize until until you start reducing the amount of time you use on your phone, like just the sheer enormous amount of time that you waste on your phone every day, right?
Oh, sorry about that. I had a connection problem. Can you hear me?
Oh, yep.
Okay. I didn't catch the last 30 seconds of what she said, but
Oh, okay. I was just
I
saying,
would
I guess
say,
like the tail end of that was that we don't even realize the sheer enormous amount of time we waste on our phones until we start to reduce it.
yeah, that's right. I think with everybody I've talked to, um, in respect to this documentary, I always usually ask them if they have some type of monitor on their phone that tells them how much they're using it, or if they set a specific amount of time aside for it. Like for me, the only time I ever use social media now is when I'm at work. So I never use it outside of work hours because it is so distracting. It's like there's been times where I was supposed to be cooking something and I looked something up on Facebook and then I smell something burning like 20 minutes later. I was like, Jesus Christ, look at this thing here that just took all of my attention away from what I was supposed to be doing. And I just burnt my lunch up.
Yeah,
But there's been many times where I was like in the middle of a task and like an hour later, I was like, oh shit, I was supposed to be doing this.
yeah,
Um, so because of that, I basically don't use social media while I only use it while I'm at work. And my rationale is okay, at work, I'm already occupied with doing crap. If I get bored, I can always use social media because I have really nothing, no other pertinent thing to do at that time. Whereas if I'm at home with my family, there's always something to do. So um, I basically don't use social media. And when I say social media, I'm meaning more Facebook and Twitter type things. I still would use YouTube, but I would never get involved in a comment section war or anything like that. I would simply just watch my pundits of the day or hot takes of the day, I guess, of different news stories. But usually, when I do use YouTube outside of work, it's to keep up with the news or to figure out how to fix something. Those are the two main reasons I use it outside of the work. Figure out how to fix something or to get my news of the day. And
yeah. That's
usually most of my news of the day is from podcasts. If I wanted to dive a little deeper and get some takes from some of my favorite personalities, I'll see what their takes are. And I don't subscribe to super, I wouldn't say, like, none of the, the, the people's opinions that I listen to are extreme. They're fairly centered. I guess outside of maybe Kyle, He's pretty left, but he's not woke left.
Yeah,
I
I like that about him, that he's like, he criticizes the like the virtue signaling of the Democrats and the identity politics and shit like that, but he's also like makes it clear often that he's a progressive. I like it when like I like following people who are on the left but criticize the left, like progressives who criticize Democrats pretending to be progressives, and like right wingers who criticize other right wingers sometimes too, like that guy Sager and Jetty on the Hill, who's a conservative, who like his job on that YouTube show is to criticize the right for the most part. Like he criticizes Republicans for basically being just as fake as the Democrats are. And one thing I appreciate about populist conservatives like him is that they criticize neoconservatives a lot, and they criticize their warmongering and shit like that.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think with a developed, I guess this documentary gets you to think about social media and its effects on your mental health. I know some people just don't do well from Facebook, and these are adults
Oh yeah.
that just see, like, I'm not going to mention like specific people. I'm just going to let you know that like I have friends that have left it specifically because they see things, like a lot of it has to do with people stupid political positions
Mm-hmm.
that they take. Like I usually do not do this on Facebook at all.
Other than
Well,
mixed mental arts group, right?
well, when it comes to Facebook, my news feed, that's a public place.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to go get hired, people in HR departments actually go and look at shit that you post,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I don't post anything about any politics or religion on my main newsfeed. I'm
Probably a good
pretty
idea.
milquetoast. Like the only thing I post are memes, and that's it, pretty much. I don't post any super controversial political opinions. You know, I have family that vary widely in politics, and I'm not there really to get into like political discussions with them. It's um, usually I keep my political debates to places that are welcoming for that, and I don't think the regular newsfeed is a good place to do that.
Yeah, that's
Um,
for sure.
on Twitter, that's a different story. On Twitter,
It's more for
that's
dunking, right?
yeah. Well, that and it's harder to discern my identity on Twitter because my name, if someone did search for my first and last name, they wouldn't exactly be able to find that in Twitter
Right.
unless they were like really deeply dived my content or whatever else I do. Twitter, I do and most Twitter I don't have like the same people who follow me that are on Facebook.
Yeah, me too.
Um, Twitter, it's not really a bunch of family members and stuff like that. It's just mostly random people I know online. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
that said, a lot like the movie like teaches us that a lot of the crazy, divisive political discourse that we see in social media spaces has a lot to do on how these social media companies monetize their platforms. Um, so it's kind of insane to see how they are shaping the collective human psyche through.
It's like ingenious the way they do it. Like the way they describe it in the documentary is that you are the product. The person has become the product that is sold to advertisers rather than advertisers selling their product to the customer, so that targeted ads can go after people, and the people don't even need to buy the products for the companies to make money.
Yeah, so I know some people would try to compare this to like television ads, but the problem with that is that television is intended for an extremely broad audience. When you go into the social media space, the ads that are targeted directly towards you are not based on a broad basis. They take a look at your data, your habits, and behaviors, and they perfectly try to steer those habits and behaviors towards certain things, as well as sell that ability to advertisers. So when you go and you want to buy an ad spot from Facebook, like the things that'll ask you is which demographics are you trying to spin this to?
Mm-hmm.
And you can basically tell Facebook exactly the type of people that you want to advertise this stuff to. And I'm pretty sure that Facebook is also using this criteria to filter the content that you're looking at. So it's not just advertisements, but it's also like in your news feed. Like your news feed is
Mm-hmm.
is algorithmically based. It's not based
Yeah.
off of what everyone's posting. It's based off of what Facebook thinks will make them the most money,
Mm-hmm.
and what Facebook thinks that will hook you in to keep um, on Facebook so that they can make more money. So the longer you're on Facebook and the more ads that you're swiping by, the more money Facebook is making.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And like
the
how personalized it is a really interesting aspect too. Like we talked about, I think we were talking last week or the week before about how an example they use in the movie about even Google searches is that two people who even are in the same family and related could look up climate change and get completely different answers for what is climate change. And
yeah,
and
it's
like
scary.
you said, like they'll give you the answer that's going to radicalize you the most and turn you tribal against people who are doing bad things to you and people in your group, which is basically like you were saying, one of their underlying strategies, right?
Yeah, so yeah, one of the interesting things they said in the movie, like regarding the searches, is that they limited, or at least in the movie, they said, oh yeah, people who live in the same area tend to get the same searches, but division is caused because people who live in different areas get different searches. And then me and my wife did this experiment and we got different searches. So it was like, wow, this is crazy. They really do individualize the search engine as well. So it makes you think when someone is looking up news articles, Google individualizes those searches for you. So I think one of the big problems you have is since these searches are individualized, everybody is not on the same page when they're getting information. So truth almost becomes lost because we're served our own individual truths by a search algorithm,
Exactly.
which is pretty scary. And it
Yeah.
totally makes sense in this day and age.
It reminds me of one thing I was thinking about earlier, which is actually more relevant now. Did you see that David Pakman video yesterday or the day before, where he was talking about how apparently 87% of Trump supporters think that the election was stolen from him and there's election fraud?
That many? I didn't know it was that many.
That's what he
Damn.
said. That's a fucking insanely high number, man. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, yes, it is. It's just crazy how fast misinformation spreads. And I don't know if people actually know it's misinformation or not. Like one of the things I was looking today on Twitter, was a video that Dave Rubin had posted of like some MAGA dude getting sucker punched or something like that. And then, do you know who Ethan Klein is?
No.
Probably not. He's a YouTuber slash podcaster. He's actually he's interviewed like quite a good amount of people. Like he's interviewed Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura. He's kind of like in their circles now because I think
Oh, cool.
they've been on each other's podcasts. So H3, they started off on YouTube, and they now just focus on their podcast now. So, but anyway, Ethan from H3 basically told, "Hey, Dave, you're spreading around misinformation. Here's the full video, or at least more context here." And before this MAGA dude got knocked out, it shows him like swinging on people and like hitting some lady. And then,
Wow.
yeah, you're like, okay, so it's kind of looks like the guy deserved getting hit. Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever. But it's never good to have any type of violence, but it makes sense that he got punched because it was kind of like a karmic thing anyway. But
Yeah. Well,
it's the type of thing that people spread online.
yeah,
Same thing with the COVID or the Covington kid.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna mention actually. Like in every case when you hear about this stuff, I think you were talking last week when we were briefly talking about this documentary, about how whenever you hear these stories about violence, about someone getting hit by someone with no justification, you have to see what happened before that led up to this and what happened after this. You need to get the clip in the full fucking context, right?
Yeah, because what happens is just people, I don't know how people get this information or who manufactures it, but you'll just see a short clip of something happen and you don't know what happened before that led up to this. Of course, there are people who don't really take the time to think about that, and they just totally jump to the conclusion that something happened here. And a lot of times this also happens when you have these totally propagandistic types of posts where you see a caption of something and then a clip of something.
Mm-hmm.
And it sucks because I've seen it happen so many times where the caption totally is propagandistic BS to frame a clip of something that is out of context.
Yep, totally.
And it's rampant on social media. It's rampant. It's so rampant that I have just given up. Like, I haven't completely given up, but a lot of times I have given up on trying to correct people. And usually people I try to correct are people I know. If it's just random assholes on the internet, I just like, fuck it, I don't know those assholes. But if it's somebody in my personal circles, I'll be like, hey, this piece of information is not true, and here are my sources.
That's a good idea, man. Because like for one thing, and we talked about this briefly before too. Like people just being all like tribalistic assholes on social media. That's why, like, it reminds me that on Twitter the other day, this woman she tweeted ironically saying, I want to get off Twitter sometime soon. I can't handle all the toxicity. And I responded to her tweet and said, I always just block assholes. Like if someone's gonna be an asshole to me right off the bat before I even talk to them, they're not worth my time. I'd rather talk to someone who like I actually have some sort of relationship with, like a family member or friend. And like you were just saying, in terms of like where people get their information, it seems like people who believe the more left-leaning stuff get a lot of their news from left-leaning news sources. people who are more libertarian maybe get it from libertarian podcasts and places like that, and then more right-leaning people get it from right-wing news sources and commentators.
Yeah, and another huge problem too is when you do try to correct these people, they automatically think that you are their political rival, so you must
Yes.
be a part of those that they hate.
If you're
Like,
not for
oh,
me, you're
you're
against me.
yeah, you're either called like a dirty libertarian or a libtard or whatever. I'm just trying to provide factual information. I'm not on anybody's side, really. I could give a shit about either of the two stupid parties. I'm just trying to get to truth here. And it's happened to me so many times where there's an automatic assumption that I must be a Democrat or a Republican.
Yeah.
And it's completely ridiculous. Like, I'd never assume that about anybody. I typically just look at what are their policy positions and I roll with that. But yeah, it's come to the point where the truth is extraordinarily difficult for certain people to find, and it shouldn't be that way. I know Twitter is trying to, and it's funny too because after watching this documentary, it is very apparent that a lot of the crazy lone wolf like psychos have had a lot of basis on being fed social media bullshit.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like
Yeah.
I can't think of any of their specific names, but there were definitely like at least one or two of the mass shooters who were just following like right-wing conspiracy theories and like white supremacist groups online, right?
Yeah, so I think one of the examples that they gave was like the guy from New Zealand who did that massacre. I think they also said, what's his name? The guy who shot like people in a black church. And there's
Oh,
been other
Dylan Roof.
Dylan Roof. There's a guy who shot like Republicans at a what was it, like a baseball game.
Oh, right.
Like all this, and there's Pizzagate. Like all this shit has been fueled by the social media companies, and now we see that they're trying to censor shit now. The reason that is they see how much harm they've done in the world, and the problem is it's too late because their business model doesn't support like their business model. Imagine, I think one of the statistics is misinformation travels and gets spread 6 times faster than facts on
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah.
So with this in mind, you'd have to think how much money would the social media companies lose if they completely stopped the halt of misinformation. It's
Probably
like
a lot.
yeah, if it's 6 times, then they would be down 600% in profits.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that they're going to stop this shit anytime soon. I don't know if they're going to adjust their algorithms to stop spreading the bullshit. But we'll see. We'll see if they're going to take any type of ethical approach. I guess we just need people like Tristram Harris around and more people like him to let us know that, hey, these companies don't really have the best ethical practices. Like they're not the best for us. And it was funny that all of these people wouldn't let their kids on social media. I know they mentioned the Lunchable CEOs would never let their kids eat Lunchables.
Yeah.
And typically these people know when the stuff that they're making is bad for us. They wouldn't let their kids interact with it.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect too, like how the people who design these algorithms, some of them won't let their kids use social media, or even in some cases have a phone, and they themselves try to limit themselves. And they a few of them have personal stories about how they have been manipulated by the products that they created to manipulate people.
Mm. Yeah, because if I don't know, if my daughter wanted a phone, there would be no social media on the phone whatsoever. I'd have to limit that. Um, and it sucks because it almost feels like schools and parents aren't doing their due diligence with social media. Maybe it's just because they're ignorant about what it does, and that's probably most of the case. But there's also the fear of being left out, and they're like, oh, well, the other kids are doing it, so I got to let my kid do it. Blah 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 blah. Like, and that's not how my mom raised me. We definitely weren't raised like that. Like one of the things we couldn't have, or I couldn't have, was a toy gun. So my mom would not let us
Oh,
have
I
any
was
toy
that way
guns.
too.
You weren't allowed to have any toy guns?
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to until I was given one as a gift by a friend for a birthday. My parents didn't let me have toy guns before that.
Yeah, so yeah, I wasn't allowed to have toy guns. That's kind of what I think social media is. I think it's much worse than a toy gun. But
That's a good analogy, though. It is like a toy gun. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's this whole aspect that you just mentioned is a big part of it that you and I talked about before when we talked about Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff's book, The Coddling of the American Mind. And of course, he is in this documentary too, specifically to talk about this like generational change basically that they talk about in that book, The Coddling of the American Mind, and how Gen Z, or the generation below me, because I'm a millennial, are
Mhm.
the first generation that was raised with social media and cell phones, growing up with them, and they're so addicted to them that, especially for teenage girls, because boys tend to get out their anger more in physical violence and direct confrontation, and teenage girls tend to be more like manipulative and going behind each other's backs and spreading rumors about each other. So, like, teenage girls, especially when they go home from getting bullied at school, they get bullied on social media all day long after that, too, which is why suicide rates have been dramatically increasing, especially for teenage girls, which is that's so fucked up.
Yeah, I think yeah, so he said like as high as what 150% increases because of social media. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like I remember what it was to be a teenager with raging hormones. And I remember the anxiety that surrounded, like, just how much anxiety you would have over your own appearance. Like I'm an old dude and I can give a fuck about what I look like when I go out and about. Like I'll fucking wear a dirty shirt to the store. Like I don't give a shit. I just want to go buy my milk and eggs and get the fuck out of there. Um, I can go with like not shaving, have a total like receding hairline. Some people care, like I just don't care that much about my appearance anymore. Main reason is that I'm married and I'm not trying to slang my dick anywhere. Um, but that's not the case when you have raging hormones as a teenager. Like your
Yeah.
appearance is almost everything at that
Yep.
age. And when you
And
have,
like that's one aspect they talk about too, like Instagram and Snapchat filters that that teenage girls are using all the time, and then just for women in general, it makes people think that they have to live up to these literally fake, literally digitally enhanced beauty standards. And I mean, of course, there are women in real life who are that good looking, and good for them for that, putting that much work into themselves. But like, it's so insane to be like, I should live up to this standard that, you know, they altered the shape of their face and they put shadows in the right places to make their boobs look bigger and to make them look skinnier and shit like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's thinking about that anxiety you get from your appearance, and you just multiply that so much with social media.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I was never a huge Instagram person, but I know Instagram is a lot about showing off like beauty and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't imagine what type of negative um, psychological effect it could have on somebody who's not cognitively complete, like a teenager.
Yeah, for sure,
Um,
man.
but I think that was probably the scariest thing. So, well, not really, because there's a couple scary things. One is the penchant for social media to divide people. It seems like they got some charts and they're looking at division, and when social media came along, the division just went off the charts, like it is now. It is so crazy that you got a president who is totally locked into conspiracy theories that he's getting fed through social media.
Yep,
And everybody else is following him like the Pied Piper, or at least on
yep,
his side of the equation.
yep.
And then we have the other side of the equation who's kind of digging it in, I say, like rubbing it in,
Uh-huh.
which really doesn't help.
Yep.
And I do remember there were the people in 2016 who were like, "Oh, Trump's not my president." Blah 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 blah. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. You're either not living in reality, or you're just signaling to other people who have similar views as you do. It's like
Yep.
whatever. But it's just like hot takes, stupid, and what I would say, anger inciting opinions seem to be popular these days. I don't see a whole lot of people who are trying to, like, the unity message isn't super popular among social media lights. Like the Rocks, like even the Rock has deviated from that. I think he
Yeah, yeah.
called out
He
Trump.
came out and endorsed Biden and Kamala and said all these platitudes that are total bullshit about them.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like, I think Schwarzenegger doesn't like Trump either, but Schwarzenegger at least is a Republican, and he was a Republican governor for a while. I
Right.
like Schwarzenegger. I think if Schwarzenegger was eligible to be president, I would probably vote for him.
I really don't know anything about his policies because he was politically active before I got interested in it.
Yeah, he's kind of like he's a centrist Republican who believes in bipartisan dealing. He's basically like a Biden of the right, I guess you could say.
Okay.
But he's never like nasty. You know what I mean? Like Trump just has a nasty attitude.
Yeah.
Um, that's not something you see with Schwarzenegger. He's always been charming. Like you can never think about Schwarzenegger being an asshole to anybody. That's just not
Yeah.
his personality. And he's always been like a charming and optimistic person. And I think he liked to smoke weed. I don't think he does
Oh, really?
anymore. Yeah, well, didn't you never watched his documentary, like Pumping Iron or whatever it's called?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Where when he wins Mr. Universe, that last time at the end of the documentary, he smokes a joint too, have all his junk food for celebration. Yeah,
Well, yeah, I think I tend to trust people who are not teetotalers a bit more. You know, Trump is quote unquote a teetotaler, but not really because he's hopped up on some other stimulants.
yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah, like a fake teetotaler. But yeah, social media, I think it preys on people. Well, even in the documentary, they say like even smart people get really taken in by it as well. And I've seen smart people take, like tons of smart people have bad takes on Twitter and stuff like that. Um, but I don't know. I think it's just in general, the feeling I feel is that it's more dividing the country than bringing people together. I know Facebook kind of was supposed to be this tool to bring people together, but I feel like it's not doing its job very well.
That's for fucking sure. And this relates back to one of the other themes in the coddling of the American mind too, where they talk about, I don't remember all of them, but they talk about the cognitive distortions that are prevalent right now, and one of them that is certainly amplified by social media is the cognitive distortion that there are good and bad people, and I am on this good and righteous team, and that other team is full of bad people who only have bad intentions.
Yeah, it does totally amplify that aspect that there's some type of battle between good and evil, and I need to make sure I'm on the right path. It's concerning because it looks like these social media has become like the battleground for a lot of political discussion, and it's like the worst place for political discussion to happen. Well, if you can find a good place for it, great, but it's pretty difficult. Um, have you checked out the Common Sense Facebook group at all?
No.
Dan Carlin's. Like I would
Oh,
equate
cool.
that group is very very similar to the mixed mental arts, except there's way more people over
Okay,
there
cool.
in that group. But I'm saying like the quality of discussion is a bit better there. You do have your crazy partisans posting bullshit, but the funny thing is when you do have these partisans posting bullshit, they get ripped to shreds in the comment sections like almost immediately because a lot of the listeners of that podcast um, are pretty centered, I would say.
That's cool.
And I would say check that out if you haven't. Also check out Mixed Mill Arts. It's like slowly meeting a slow death, it seems. But if you're
Yeah,
looking for something adjacent, I would say that's somewhere to look. Because I know Daniele posts there as well. So
you think it eventually will be like you, me, and like 10 other people in mixed mental arts?
well, there's probably a few reasons that is. It's one, I just don't use social media as much as I used to because I used to post a shitload of things in there, but I just don't use social media as much as I used to. And I'm more like the only time I post is when I feel it's too slow and I need to just throw something out there for people to talk about. Um, just to get people discussing things. And usually when I do post
Yeah,
something, it's pretty neutral. It's like a question. It's not me accusing one side of this or that.
yeah,
Unless it's something humorous, like Giuliani speaking at the Four Seasons landscaping thing. That's funny as hell, so I posted it.
oh, I
But
haven't seen.
usually I try to stay neutral just to get people's thoughts on things. I'm not there to say, oh, you Trumpsters or blah, 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 or you wokesters or blah, 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 blah. Let's just see what people think about these
Yeah,
things.
I try to like another thing that I have been trying to do with social media lately is try to avoid getting into just toxic arguments with people. And, I'll state my opinion strongly, as I often do, but even though it's really fucking challenging, I try to listen to the other person even if they vehemently disagree with me. And I could, I barely managed to do that, but I did with a few people who I sent that video that was you, Chris, and I talking about the election, and two of the
Hmm.
people I sent it to were are fully convinced that there was voter fraud and Trump was cheated. However, they don't think that even if the lawsuits go through, they think that the results will still not end up being overturned. I think they believe that because the media and government are corrupt, so he should have rightfully won, but I could be wrong about that aspect, but they still are like totally convinced that that actually happened in the election.
I don't get it.
I
I
don't
don't know who
either.
convinced them. Where are they? It's like every time I
Well,
see one of these weird election conspiracy things, it just like boggles my mind.
yeah. Well, one of the
Um,
like I asked one of the guys where they heard about this, and one of the things they sent me was a Tim Poole clip, and like he's basically like you and I have talked about him many times before. He used to be a pretty like reasonable kind of centrist journalist and was more fact driven, but now he's kind of become a slave to the algorithm, and he's kind of basically become a full on Trump supporter grifter too, and he voted for Trump and everything. So I'm at least highly skeptical of his especially right leaning supporting claims.
well, I know someone also sent me that. I wonder if it was the same person,
It might be.
but but it was a claim about what was it like? Random 100,000 people went for Biden in Michigan. Was it that video?
I'm not sure.
It was basically about like there was a lot of misinformation going on where people were saying, "Oh, during a CNN broadcast, Michigan jumped up 100,000 votes for Biden," and they were using CNN's reaction as a confirmation that some malfeasance had gone on. Um, and then I did a very minimal amount of digging, and by minimal, a 5-second Google search, and I found out that it was a clerical error made by the Board of Elections in Michigan. It had nothing to do with a nefarious act of giving Biden 100,000 votes in one go. It just doesn't make sense. How stupid would it be to give Biden 100,000 votes? And the clerical error was they put one too many zeros, and it was supposed to be 15,000 instead of 150,000 or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So,
I've heard some of these theories like that. I forget how many, but about how there are apparently multiple sworn affidavits from people who worked at poll centers about how they were told to throw out votes or disregard votes from Trump or something like that. I haven't actually seen any evidence for these things, but like you and I talked about this before, it seems like even if Trump's lawsuits go through with this things, even if he wins, it wouldn't be enough to overturn the results of the election because he what in some states especially, like I forget which one you were mentioning specifically, but you said in one state specifically, which is a key state for Trump, Biden won it by something like 20,000 votes, I think.
well, it's even bigger now. I think in Pennsylvania it's like 60,000 or something like that.
Yeah. I
So
mean, that may be a
that's very,
small amount in terms of percentage, but in terms of the sheer number of votes, that's pretty fucking hard to
it's a
overturn.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things people like a lot of white right wingers have done this, and I don't mean this to be like a right winger bashing thing. It's just I don't care who's saying it. I'm going to try to push factual information versus misinformation. Like a
Hmm.
lot of people who are skeptical about Biden's win always cite the 2000 election, Bush v. Gore,
Oh,
and
yeah, I've heard
well,
that too.
yeah, yeah. Guess what? It's one state, and the vote margin was 537 votes or something like that.
Yeah, I've
Like,
told that to like one or two of the people who were mentioning this, and they said, "Yeah, but Al Gore was president for 36 days." Yeah, but it's like a
no, he
margin of
wasn't.
hundreds
He
of
was
votes, not
not.
tens of thousands. He wasn't?
That's another. That's another. Yeah, that's another right wing misinformation.
Oh, okay.
Gore was not. He was not declared by the media. Bush was,
Oh, okay. Wow.
and then
Yeah, and
and then
and
Gore wanted the. Gore is the one that wanted the recount
oh, I didn't even know
because
that.
Bush
Wow.
won.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes
Yes,
okay.
Bush. Yeah, so whoever says that bullshit just doesn't read history. Gore
Yeah.
was never declared a winner. Like you can go and pick up. Well, there's you can look up the New York Times and you can find um, archives of the article. It's like Bush won. Everybody declared Bush the winner. Gore was the one who wanted to do the recount, not Bush. I was alive back then. I remember this shit. um, like in 2000, I was technically an adult.
Right.
So Gore was never declared the winner. It's like these people are having the Mandela effect on their fucking minds. They don't know what they're talking about. Gore was never declared a winner, ever.
Yeah.
Gore was the one that disputed the Florida results. And what happened when he tried to get a recount done, a bunch of like paid Republican actors, not actors as in stage actors, but in political actors, went down and they staged protests, would actually stop them from doing the recount. The people who were doing the recount gave up because they were being impeded by protesters.
Wow.
And these were people. So I don't know what these people are talking about who said Gore was declared the winner. They're just stupid, and they're probably found this out on social media. They're probably puppeting the same opinion that they've seen on social media. But that
Yep.
shit is not correct.
Yep.
I've seen a lot of what right wing propagandists, and I say this because there are certain, like I go on Twitter, and there are a lot of people who kind of push this stuff as kind of the origin of these, and I just always shake my head, and I can't believe that these people have followers, but it is what it is. What it is.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's a lot of misinformation that gets pushed out there, and I guess the problem is that we have as a society with social media is that our truth makers are who we choose them to be.
Yep.
Um, that since there's no gatekeepers to the truth, social media will just push whatever we want to hear
Yep. Yep.
based off of some algorithm that makes some money.
And this is like to go into misinformation too, like to like you were saying, this isn't just a partisan thing. It's not just a right wing thing. Like regardless of your political identity, it happens. Like I think we talked about this really briefly at one point, but even in the documentary itself, it conveys some misinformation about the whole Russiagate scandal and about how Russia actually did not only hack the election, but actually overturn the results. And what you and I have both learned from more like more left leaning political commentators themselves, who are left leaning people who criticize the left, like Aaron Mate and Kyle Kalinske and Jimmy Dore, is that the Russiagate scandal turned out to be like almost baseless. Like there were people who were manipulating things on social media, but their funding was, I forget how much it was exactly, but something tiny like $5,000, and they had things like memes of Jesus jacking off and say like let's join hands together or some shit like that. And like
What?
yeah, that's apparently like the type of thing that was supposedly to have supposedly to have like caused Trump to be elected.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people puppeting the whole, oh yeah, Russia elected Trump and they hacked our voting. I never believed it because there was not sufficient evidence from I would say credible media sources. I know credible seems subjective depending on who you talk to. Like
Mhm.
some people think Alex Jones is credible, and some
Yeah,
people think Rachel Maddow has some really incredible things to say, and Hannity
yeah,
and all those people. But when I say it's just what facts do you have? What investigations happened and what did they uncover? They uncovered attempts, but they never really uncovered any successes. Like uh, there was no evidence that Russia successfully hacked into our voting machines and changed people's votes or anything like that. I
yeah.
know,
It was all social media, wasn't it?
yeah, it was all like bullshit that they've been posting online to not really to, from what I understand, they weren't trying to get anyone specific elected. They were just trying to sow chaos.
Yeah,
So when I say sow chaos, it's like crazy creating opposing Facebook groups and then having them meet in real life unknowingly and possibly causing some type of chaos or riot.
yeah,
Like it's yeah, the Russiagate thing is just like, man, what was a colossal waste of media attention,
yeah,
in my opinion. Like you had all these hopeful Democrats who are like, oh, we can't wait till they throw Trump in jail and he's going to get impeached and blah, yada yada yada. I couldn't tell you how much of the shit I heard online.
yeah,
Um, I was like, yeah, nothing is gonna fucking happen. It's gonna die in the Senate. I even knew it was gonna die in the Senate. Like before I even watched any significant coverage of it, I was like, why are you people all happy? Like nothing's gonna happen to them. You guys are wasting your time. Um, and it ended up being true. Same thing with the Mueller investigation. It was like,
yeah,
oh yeah, they uncovered so much wrongdoing and blah 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 blah. I was like, yeah, and what happens? Nothing.
yeah.
Yeah, like a bunch of his associates got busted, but did that really affect Donald in any way? Not really.
And like
Yeah.
it seems like like he's too dumb and unorganized to have engaged in this level of corruption.
Yeah, it seems like it, right? Like he's so self-serving that his corruption is all completely self-serving. And when I say corruption, we're talking about like the money he takes for his resorts and things like that, and hosting foreign dignitaries, and him still operating businesses supposedly. I don't know what. Well, if he's not operating it himself, he is certainly enriching his family doing so, because his son runs the company now.
Yeah, and
So
like there. I just mean in terms of Russiagate. There is other like corruption stuff for Trump, like there is for every politician, I'm sure. Like one of them that we probably both heard about from Kyle Kalinske is how something about how he gave some sort of giant payout to Saudi Arabia, and they all came and I forget whether it was they all came and stayed at his Trump hotel or they invested in Trump hotel. Either way, he made
Yeah,
tons
he's
of
personally profited from it.
yeah,
Yeah, so it certainly looks really bad for him, but like the media um, completely missed the mark on that because they didn't even really cover it at all.
yeah,
But yeah, it's just I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not convinced, even with Trump gone. Well, he's not completely gone yet, but even with his eventual outing, I'm not convinced that things will be calmed to a level that I am sufficient with.
yeah. Well, you and I, you, Chris, and I were talking last week, I think it was, about how one of the only good things about Biden may be that he will kind of like calm down the country at least a little bit. But I mean, other than that, like you were saying, it's not gonna like stop all this political division. It's not going to end coronavirus or any of this crazy shit that people have been talking about.
Mhm. Yeah, the same people who called, like during Obama's presidency, the same people who called him a communist are going to call Biden a communist.
Yeah, even though
Even
in
though,
terms of his policy, that makes no sense whatsoever.
yeah, so that's kind of what I'm thinking. That's part of it is not going to change. And I don't know. I think most people in this documentary who were talking about the future were quite pessimistic, I would
Yeah,
say. But I kind of share their view a little bit because these companies, look at how much money they have. Google
yeah,
and Facebook, those are two of the most powerful companies in the United States. And when profit is the motive, it seems like anyone is unstoppable when they have that much power. And the downside is, how do you find out about this? You know, how do we find out about this, the dangers of social media? And that makes me think they also have the power to suppress anything negative about them as well. So it's really hard. Like, how, as a public, are we going to be able to inform ourselves without this? And I don't know if you know this, but I was going to ask what your opinion was. Did you know that there's some type of bill going on in Australia where news content has to be paid for? It cannot be given away for free. Did you hear about this?
no, I lost my connection for a minute. Can you say that again?
Okay, so I don't know if you know this, but there's some case going on between Google and Australia. Have you heard about this?
No.
Okay, so Australia is trying to make it mandatory that news content has to be paid for.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so of course, um, so this is a law that Australia is trying to enact. The biggest lobbyist against this law is Google. The funniest thing about this is Google isn't a news company. Doesn't that seem odd? Did you lose connection again? Uh-oh.
Oh, I'm here. Can you not hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
All right, so Australia wanted to put into law that news had to be paid for. Like, you couldn't be offered for free with ads. And its
Interesting.
biggest proponent of that is Google. Google is its biggest opposition force against that.
And they're not a news
Um,
organization, like you said.
what's that? Yeah, they're not a news organization, they're an advertisement agency. Well, that's where Google gets most of its money. That's where they get the vast majority of their money from, is from advertisements.
Yep.
And I need to ask Absolute what his thinking is about that, because he lives there. I wonder what he thinks. But
Who's that?
I think that's a good. What's his name? David Apps.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he lives in Australia.
Oh yeah, I wanted to get his take. I need to post this in Mixed Metal Arts. I'll, as controversial as this seems, I think it's a good first step. Because right now it sounds like they're trying to break the current advertisement model. And I think that's a very good first step to get back to truth-based news. It sucks, but it seems like whenever we had to pay for news, the quality of our news was so much better.
Yeah. And they say in the documentary too, right, that getting things for free is not actually free because you're being marketed these ads, and then you go and buy. You do, like, even though some people can resist it for the most part, you go and buy things, and you're paying for other things related to the content that you're consuming.
Mm. Yeah, so I wonder how that fight's going to be, because of course this also affects Facebook as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to have to look into that more, because I just heard something about it. I was looking at my silent Bloomberg feed here, and on the ticker it said something about Australia making people pay for news. I was like, oh, that sounds like they're going in the right direction to me. And it's not that news had always had to be paid for. You always had your local news stations. I'm guessing you wouldn't have to pay for those, for your broadcast news stations. But things like, I guess, like the New York Times and, all your other sites that purport to be news would have to charge you. But I'm guessing there might have been some loophole around that. You could just say your site isn't a news site, but I don't know how that would work. I don't know how their law would be combating that loophole. But I think that's a good step in the right direction. Because it's not just social media, right? Because in the movie they were discussing like um, Google's practices as well. So anybody that uses you as a product.
Yeah. Yeah, it might be a good idea. And we I guess when we were to this reminds me of when we were talking about that Matt Taibbi book called Hate Inc. about how, because the news model is literally based on professional wrestling, people are often like they're more psychologically healthy when they don't get the news, and you might not actually end up being that informed about the news, especially since we'll have our different versions of truth based on the sources that are presented to us based on what the algorithm thinks will radicalize us the most, right?
Yeah, well, the I don't know if it's radicalized us the most. It just so happens that that is a correlative factor in keeping us engaged, right?
Yeah.
So those that have more passion about something tend to be more engaged with something. Like this past few weeks, I've just been watching all this car shit, man. Just reviews of tools, how to clean fuel injectors, how to pick the right clutch for your car. Like I've just been watching tons of different car videos and stuff like that. Like I understand how being somewhat passionate about something and having all this content to consume sucks you in.
Hmm.
Because if I looked at the last probably 30 watched YouTube videos, it would be like car shit and maybe some Kyle Kalinske thrown in here and there, maybe a Pac-Man video or some Philly D videos, but it's mostly car shit. And sometimes I just go down that rabbit hole looking for information on how to work on something in the car. And then finding this other guy's videos that he does other car stuff. And yeah, you just get totally sucked into it.
Yep.
And since I'm passionate about doing things with my car, like it seems like YouTube has found the right algorithm to throw content at me to suck me into YouTube and get me
Yep.
to watch those ads that I try to skip regularly.
Yep.
But yeah, man, it's they certainly try to keep you there and keep you watching.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Whatever works, right? Like, I remember uh, on on a Joe Rogan podcast when he was talking to Ari Shaffir, he said he experimented with the algorithm to see if it's designed to specifically radicalize you, and he just deliberately watched like cute puppy videos and only cute puppy videos, and eventually the algorithm was only suggesting those to him, and that makes sense given how you were describing the algorithm works, because the algorithm figured out that that's the thing that's going to keep him glued to the content the most, because that's what interests him the most. Like
Hmm.
it's really works well too. Like the only reason that I avoid getting so addicted to YouTube is that I kind of have these rules set for myself, like yesterday, for example, when I finished listening to Words of Radiance, I was thinking, okay, now I got to watch these YouTube videos and listen to these podcasts about Words of Radiance. So, but I'm going to limit it to one video about it by Murphy Napier, one video about it by Daniel Green, and one
Hmm.
of the Legendarian podcasts. I could watch multiple things from all of those people, but I'm just going to do one, and I'm only going to do those people. And during the day for me, I'm usually mostly using my phone to listen to an audiobook. And then at night when I'm eating supper, that's the only time I allow myself to just binge on YouTube, basically, because I
Is that
plan on,
night?
yeah.
Man. Yeah, YouTube binging occurs for me, of course, when I'm at work. Like I avoid all of this stuff, most of it, when I'm just doing non-work things. Um, Podcasts are an exception there, and audiobooks are, but that's it. Um, I don't consider podcasts to be social media, and neither do I consider books because there's no real interactive feature there. You're just kind of listening to things.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, totally, man. Oh yeah, there was one thing I forgot to bring up about this movie is that there's a dramatization element to it.
Oh yeah, I meant to bring that up too. I thought the whole like after school special aspects were kind of lame, except for the parts with that guy who's the actor from Mad Men being the like little virtual like being little virtual triplets, figuring out how to manipulate that teenage kid to keep him on his phone.
Well, they're supposed to be personifications of the algorithm.
Yeah.
So one of the things I did, like, I understand why you think it's lame, I think that part is actually pretty necessary because people don't understand how algorithms work and what they do. Um, and that kind of gives them an easier way to understand on how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, some of the stuff in there was over the top, like the girl breaking the box open to get her phone.
Yeah,
As I
I
know
could
that
see
shit.
that happening in real life, though.
I could see it, but that shit wouldn't fly in my household. Just saying now.
Yeah, the mom
Um,
just lets her keep the phone after she breaks it out of the locked box.
yeah, that phone would have been smashed into a million pieces if it were me, but that's here or there. But um, I actually thought, oh man, I thought it was super entertaining, to be honest, the whole dramatization part, because I felt that some of it was pretty corny and entertaining, like the extreme center that he
Yeah.
joined. He joined the EC,
Yeah.
which is supposed to be like this radical political movement that's, I guess, kind of like QAnon or something like that. And
Yeah.
their symbol is like the black power fists, and it says "No, don't vote" or something like
Yeah.
that. And he went to like an EC rally, an extreme center rally. And I think the funny thing is too, like the videos he was like watching kind of reminded me of um, what's that guy, Owen Benjamin?
Oh, yeah.
This just kind of looks like a guy just broadcasting like nonsense.
Yep.
But I was like, wow, this is kind of like interesting. I thought it was interesting that they chose extreme center as like the ideological group. I was like, hey, are they making fun of me here, or what the hell's going on? But I figured they kind of had to choose something like that to stay, I guess, to I guess avoid some type of partisanism, right? That's probably why they created this fictional group called the Extreme Center
Yeah.
or EC. I thought that part was pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know what you thought about that.
I did like that part too, where he was like that part where the algorithm was figuring out all these ways to get him back on his phone when he agreed to be off of it for a week because his mom said that she would buy him a new phone if he did that. And then of course he caved. And an interesting aspect of that too is that this girl he likes at school, and it seems like she likes him too because she smiles at him when he looks over at her. He never talks to
Mhm.
her in real life, and instead they interact with each other on social media. And the thing that they get after the algorithm guys try everything to get him back on his phone is the a notification on a dating app about how, or maybe it's a social media app about how his ex-girlfriend is dating someone new, and he goes down this rabbit hole. And I like that part when he's just like in his spending all his time alone in his room, and it has these virtual representations of all the videos that he's watching, and like the rabbit hole that he's gone down with all of these videos on simultaneously. And the like this cheesy part that I thought was interesting too was his older sister, who's the only person in the family who doesn't have a cell phone. I thought that was
Mhm.
interesting. That was still interesting when she was like knocking at his door and he was lying alone in the dark just on his phone. And I just got the sense that we're supposed to think, oh, he's a
Yeah,
junkie.
and
He really
it
is.
also showed that he was getting depressed over all this stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, definitely.
and same thing with the daughter who was succumbing to the unrealistic beauty standards, and she got some flack for her ears, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it just shows you kind of in a general way of how these things can be damaging to youth. Um, and it does show how much of a time sink and what type of rabbit holes the son went into.
Yep.
Like he started skipping his I guess soccer practice, and he started putting like these EC posters all over his wall.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just kind of showing you a general idea of like the type of damage that heavy social media use can do.
Mm-hmm.
So you thought you didn't like the dramatizations?
I thought a lot of this, a few parts of it were interesting, I thought, but I thought like a lot of it was cheesy and after school especially.
I liked it. Like the main reason I liked it because when I watched it with my wife, it was easier to convey and to actually because you have all these like nerds talking about nerd shit, and then you have these dramatizations, right? And I
Hmm.
thought that she would connect more with like the dramatizations of the family situations. And I made sure when Jonathan Haidt came up, I was like, you better pay a lot of attention to this part right here. Because
Yeah.
I told her, I think this is the most important part of this movie. And she's
Well,
like, yeah,
especially since you guys have a daughter, right?
yeah, especially because we have a daughter. I was like, this is the most important part of this movie. Make sure you take a look at this. And we're like, yeah, no social media for her.
Yeah.
That's pretty much a given. But one of the things I was thinking of, and I don't know if this is a thing, do do schools ban cell phone use at all, or
Yeah,
can
they
kids like use cell phones?
even when I was in high school, um, like this was I think this was even before smartphones. Everyone still had primitive phones, and a bunch of people had flip phones. But even then, at first, like I think in grade 9 and maybe in grade 10, everyone was allowed to have their cell phones at school, and I would like listen to music all day on my iPod. But then
Uh-huh.
they banned all electronic devices like that, and they banned them for everyone in the school because like one or two kids got caught watching porn in class, and then they
Wow.
were banned for everyone after that.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I kind of happened in a bad way, but I think it's a good thing to ban phones. Now that I just think about it. Um, So I didn't have a goddamn phone when I was in school. Like if your parents needed to get a hold of you, they call the office and the office calls you to the office.
Hmm.
Um, that's just how it worked back then. You did not have to have a phone. And I don't know, I think a phone would be a huge distraction too, right? Uh,
Hmm.
and they're there to study, not to, well, yeah, there's definitely a social element to school, but it's a controlled environment more so than social media, which is almost uncontrolled. But it also forces people to interact in person rather than through their phones, as people can be pretty harsh when they're not in person.
Yep.
And I think they should be pushing these face-to-face interactions more in schools and trying to get social media usage out of school. But
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
just my two
when
cents.
at the time when I was in high school, I hated it, but I didn't think about all of any of those aspects, and I think people probably didn't know the sheer extent of the harm from the algorithms and stuff like that on social media.
Yeah, it's back in the beginning of Facebook for me. It was just what Mafia Wars and Farmville and shit like that.
Oh, I remember playing Mafia Wars.
That was like the big thing that kept me playing like on Facebook, and then it just kind of evolved into people screaming at each other about politics. It's no longer about playing Candy Crush anymore. It's that model apparently doesn't work for them anymore. So it's
Yep.
just show them ads and make them angry.
That's
because
interesting
when
that
they're
works
angry,
more than getting people to play video games, because video games can be pretty addictive too.
yeah, for sure. But I think a lot of people realized about the model, because the models that they use are what you pay to, like, it's pay for play or something like that. Because when you buy a game from a store, you have like the total package. But when you're, like it said, when you are playing for free, you are the product.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was also an aspect with gaming and mobile platforms and on
Yeah,
Facebook.
especially like the app games or the ones on social media, right?
Well, the ones that
There's,
are free.
yeah, the free ones. There's a South Park episode about this called "Freemium Isn't Free," and it's about how here in Canada, the Canadians they made a Terrence and Phillip free app game, and
Hmm.
a bunch of the kids in South Park they ran up their phone bills massively by hundreds of dollars because they were buying all of these free little upgrades. And the funny thing too was that the game wasn't even that fun. It was just like constantly rewarding. Like you have to make Terrence and Phillip fart enough so that you can collect enough farts as a form of currency to be able to build a new hospital or some other new building or something like that. So it doesn't even have to be an interesting game. I
Yeah.
remember one of my friends, he got addicted to doing that with Clash of Clans. He was he was playing it all the time, and every once in a while he would spend, I forget how much money it was, but he's like, I spent $25 today on Clash of Clans. I'm like, how much are you gonna
Jesus.
end up paying for that free game?
Yeah, I remember I did play that for a little while, but I was like, yeah, it's kind of boring.
Yeah,
Like most of those games end up just being kind of boring, um, and repetitive.
yeah,
It is what it is. Um, but yeah, I think, unless we as a society collectively step up to this business model, that we are doomed as a society. Well, as a civically functioning society, we're doomed.
yep,
I think Facebook, Twitter, I don't know if YouTube does this so much anymore, because I know they have been trying to severely limit conspiracy content on their um, on their platform. But I know
oh
for sure, and I find YouTube so much more useful than the other platforms, because I learn so much practical things on YouTube that it's not even funny.
yeah,
Like, I think if YouTube didn't exist, I would not have been able to fix my car on my own.
yeah,
I know that for damn sure. Um, but I think YouTube is a very valuable asset when it's used right, but it could certainly be abused
yeah,
by grifters and people making money on spreading disinformation.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
But yeah, if we don't rise up as a society, um, and realize that this stuff is just going to make us completely dysfunctional, then I think we're just headed for dysfunction.
Yeah,
Um, and it's funny when people say, or at least people like who are afraid of AI taking over, the shit has already happened.
yeah,
What do
yeah.
you think an algorithm is?
Yeah, they talked about that in the documentary, right? How the AI is
Yeah,
already here and it's already working on us.
yeah, and we're seeing the effects of it now. And the people who said be wary of AI were pretty much right.
Yep,
As this is very much messing with our collective minds.
yep, definitely.
But yeah, people just want to blame it on postmodernism. No,
There's
it's
nothing to do with fucking postmodern. So stupid.
yeah, they're just trying to, well, they're trying to find out the truth. They're just not looking in the right place.
Yeah.
It's like you're being filtered. If as long as you're a heavy social media user, you're being manipulated.
Yep.
Um, and there's a supercomputer pointed at your brain that knows which buttons to press to keep you cycling through your news feed and your Twitter news feed and all that. I think one of the one of the things they said is to never click on a recommendation. Is that what they said?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I've done that
I
before
actually.
for sure. I've definitely I'm subscribed to so many YouTube channels. I try to avoid that as much as possible and only watch content from channels that I'm already subscribed to, and I do that for the most part, but every once in a while, I'm like for example, recently we both follow that booktuber named Daniel Green, and I started
Mhm,
following Murphy Napier's booktuber channel too. I had seen a lot of her videos and suggestions before, but never clicked on any. But then I started
mhm.
following her too, and I do that more. I do that like I guess maybe not that often, but probably more often than I think. And like I said, I do stick to channels I'm already subscribed to for the most part, but I do that too, and I'm sure everyone succumbs to that from time to time, at least.
Oh, I always succumb to it. Usually, I succumb to it when they recommend animal videos, and I just go into animal video like rabbit hole. If it's political, I try to avoid recommendations. It's just very hard for me to avoid the animal videos.
Oh, okay,
It's like, oh, this kitten did this, or hey, this amazing squirrel saved its babies from X, Y, and Z. As a look at this man's pet bobcat he thought was a normal cat and stuff like that. Those are the ones that are hard to avoid. I just see them and I might spend a way too much time looking at these people's animals and pets. But that's probably the worst. That and the car stuff.
right.
But usually the car stuff is just coming from a couple of people I subscribe to, and it's just like say three or four people that make car videos, and mostly it's all maintenance things and recommendations. It's not like oh, Toyotas are better than Nissans. It's not like
Right.
something like that. It's just like, oh, we love all types of cars here.
Right.
Except this one guy, he does bag on Fiat quite a bit, but it's understandable. We didn't know. Do you know the whole Carlos Ghosn thing? The
No.
guy that he's like a CEO. He was like CEO of Nissan, and wow, this is a crazy story. So Nissan had a bunch of financial trouble, and they got this outsider CEO, which is kind of insane because it's Nissan's a Japanese company, and a lot of their companies are pretty homogenous. But they get this outsider who was also, I don't know if he was CEO of Fiat or like a chairman on Fiat, but they hired him and then they merged the companies. And after they merged the companies, like Nissan started making really shitty cars and they kind of fallen out of favor.
Oh,
Because one of my first cars was a Nissan and it was pretty badass. Um, it was a rear wheel drive, a 5-stick manual. It's one of the most legendary drift cars that you could think of. It's called a S13, which is a very famous drifting car. That
okay.
was my first car. I didn't know anything about this stuff. I just like bought the car, and then it wasn't until like after I had gotten a different car that I'd known that the car that I bought had like kind of like this legendary status of being one of the best drifting cars ever. Well, anyway, Nissan kind of went down. Like they just made these cars with questionable quality, And the good cars that they produce, they only had the two, which is the 370 and the GTR. And those are like their nice sports car type cars. The problem with those cars is they haven't updated either of them in either a decade.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, they're still the same body style and everything. So um, anyway, they find out that the CEO was embezzling money, so he got arrested or put on house arrest
Wow.
before they put him on trial. And what this guy did is he basically did a Metal Gear Solid escape plan where he hid in a box. The box got put on a private plane, and the plane flew to Lebanon. And Lebanon doesn't have extradition, so he's basically a criminal that got out of Japan. And I guess one of
Wow.
his there's like a couple of different narratives that go on here. Um, the Japanese narrative is like he embezzled a shitload of money, like it's like over $30 million or something like that. His narrative is that it was a total what do you call that mock sham trial was going to happen. That he wasn't like look at Japan's prosecution rate. 99.9% of people who go to court lose, and he was basically knew that he was inevitably going to go to prison. I guess if you look at Japan's prosecution rate, the reason why it's so high is that in Japan you need a shitload of evidence. Like prosecutors don't prosecute a case unless they know absolutely that they're going to win. It's not the same here like in the US, where if they might have a chance, they can argue their shit in court and maybe win. In Japan, prosecutors only go to trial when they think they have such hard evidence that there's not going to be any question that the person was guilty of a crime,
Oh,
which
okay.
is, I think,
That's
a good. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was going to say what you were just starting to say. It's good to be less litigious than it seems Americans in general are.
Yeah. So when it comes to that, like, I totally respect that type of prosecution style. I guess I respect it because one, they don't try to drag people into court over flimsy evidence. Because if you, now that I think of that, I'm wondering how much of taxpayers' time gets wasted when crimes that aren't really have that great evidence are gone through the court system and those people get off and whatnot. It's
Probably a
probably
lot.
why we have so many fucking people in prison here because um, it seems like in the US, prosecutors also will tend to exaggerate or leave out shit in order to people in prison or disenfranchise people in order to put them in prison. That's another conversation, but anyway, I don't know how we got off on this topic, but yeah, that guy was basically going to go to prison and then he snuck out of Japan. um, and I don't know what the hell's going to happen with that guy, but it was kind of a big story when it happened.
Wow. Yeah, we got down that rabbit hole by talking about how
Talked
uh,
about cars
yeah,
and the algorithm, and then how a guy hates fiat and the
yeah,
whole fiat CEO situation.
yeah,
But yeah, that's a rabbit hole.
yeah,
But yeah, I guess we could start to rate this.
yeah. I
I give it 2 thumbs up, man. Like
Me too.
I think this is such an important thing for people to watch. I think everybody who uses social media should watch this and be aware of what's going on.
I agree. Yeah,
I've started to include a lot of what I've learned from this documentary into a lot of the conversations I have on social media. It's starting to help me reframe some things. Um, and one of the things that helps me reframe, if it's not someone's fault that they might be misinformed, um, I can't think of it as a failure of that person because I don't know how crazy the algorithm is going at them. Um, I don't know how much social media they're using. I don't know what their environment is. I don't know how siloed their information is. It could be certain that they're just not seeing any information that would be truthful or credible.
yeah. Like we were talking earlier about how this happens regardless of your political persuasion. Like how you and I have talked before about how like I've been disowned by a family member over fucking stupid radicalized political shit, and it's pretty clear to me, or at least seems to be the case, that they're only getting like one type of really narrowly focused news from a very narrow political perspective that's all about like basically uber lefties are good and all right-wing things are bad and evil.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. But I started less to blame specific people on the faults of what they're being fed because just after I did that experiment with my wife, I was like, you know what? I really can't fault people for this. Like, I used to just think it was everybody's seeing the same shit that I do. It's just that they lack like a critical thought process. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think they're being manipulated and played for money, basically.
Definitely, yeah.
Um, and I think it's not really a failing on their part. It's just that the algorithm has found a way to manipulate them into thinking in certain things. And the way that works is they get put into an information silo. Now, what happens when they're put in the
Yeah,
information silo? It's like, how do you dig back out of that?
that's
When
a
I
good
got into
point. I should try to do that too, to try to look at people as, having been information siloed rather than that they have critical thinking problems. Because whenever I hear these arguments that are clearly fundamentally logically flawed, like it's probably, like you were saying, better to assume that they believe this because it's the only perspective that they have been shown, and they haven't been shown any disagreement with it, so they think that it's absolutely true, and it's not necessarily that their fault, because regardless of how much we resist it and we think we may be better at other people than other people at doing that, we all get manipulated by it to one degree or another sometimes, and probably are more so than we think. Like I think, like you and I, we try to get a more widely varying political perspective from different sources, and a lot of people we know do as well. But I'm sure there are probably things that we're missing out on, and biased perspectives and misinformation that we're getting, because it's almost impossible for that not to happen.
Yeah, it certainly is, but I'd also say too, one of the bigger problems too is when you're in these silos. The silos specifically teach you what the other side is through the most worst and insane aspects. And
Definitely.
usually those worst and insane aspects are like an actual vast majority I'm sorry, a vast minority of what the other side actually believes in.
Yes.
So you have one side believing everybody's a racist Nazi, and then another side thinking that they are cultural Marxists and whatnot, and
Yeah,
they're gonna put
exactly.
everybody in a
Yeah.
gulag and wokeify everybody.
Yeah, it's Nazi is bro.
And that's a huge problem. It's like when you paint the other side in such extremes, what do you think is going to happen? Yeah, we get people LARPing Civil War in the streets. You can blame that on not only the media, but the social media's penchant for siloing people. I'm not sure why I have the advantage of being able to see and be outside of that silo. Maybe it's just not so hard or not so easy for people to get that type of content. As I remember back in my Gamergate days, I was fed a lot of Gamergate content by the algorithm. Um, that's not so much these days. It's kind of more centristy type of things. And some slight left, slight right things. But I don't know. Like, I think even maybe the algorithm is actually catering to my centristiness.
That could be the
Who
case.
knows? Who
I bet it's been doing that for me too. Yeah,
knows?
that's a good point.
Yeah, but it might not even be my own self advocating for that. So who even knows, man?
Yeah,
I think what
because like
mainly broke me out of that was just like listening to podcasts, I guess, because I don't listen to super partisan podcasts. Um, like I guess the Rogan Sphere and news stuff, which is straight news. I'm not talking about opinion news. I'm talking straight news. Is
yeah,
this people delivering the facts without opinion? I think that's something that everybody needs is to at least expose themselves to straight fact news. And what I mean by straight fact is just they just deliver events and what happened, and they don't give you really much of any opinion about that. I know it's hard. Some people are already siloed so far that any reasonable news outlet is considered to be fake. Like anybody reporting, uh, the election results, like even Trump supporters are starting to call Fox News like fake news, which seems pretty insane to me.
yeah, because they're denying the conspiracy theories that he got cheated out of the election, which is surprising.
Yeah, it's going to be a rough few months. I don't know what's going to happen. I I could only just try to be a calm presence. I guess my only thing is I want to advocate for people to use social media less. I just want people to try to experience actual life instead of virtual life. I know it's much harder to do this during COVID, and probably COVID has probably amplified all of this shit to 11.
Oh
I
yeah,
have no doubt.
for sure. Yeah,
But hopefully, when people can go out and about safely, this shit will calm down a bit. I
yeah.
almost feel like the early Karens from the very beginning of the COVID thing. I wonder how much of those early Karens were like on social media a bit too much.
I bet it a lot. Yeah, like we've talked before about how, when you're trapped in your house all the time or at least much more than usual, you're much more likely to be sucked into your phone because you're not like out doing stuff and things like that. And I was just thinking as you were mentioning that too, if you like if you can't see people in the real world as much due to the COVID lockdowns, of course, a good alternative to doing that is like to like podcasts like this, or if you don't have like a podcast or a YouTube channel, just like doing video calls with people about things, because that even if you're not sharing a physical presence with someone, you're looking at them face to face, or at least you're hearing their voice. And I was just thinking about an example of that from yesterday, because a little while ago, my friend Shane Kennedy, who I've talked to here before, he sent me an essay a while ago about some really extreme theological stuff that I disagree with. But I read this long essay by Jonathan Pageau, who's this well-known Orthodox Christian who got famous from being connected to Jordan Peterson. And it was an essay about that he wrote about Marshall McLuhan, who's this famous, I think he was like a sociologist or something like that. I forget what he was exactly. But basically, the essay is a concept that I find ridiculous on its face, which is that the Protestant Reformation basically like destroyed or ruined the true Christianity. So, but instead of like getting outraged and having a stupid text battle debate with him, I suggested that we do a podcast about it. So we're going to do a podcast about it next week. I'm going to ask him the long list of questions that I came up with while I was reading that essay.
Well, is he for the essay or against the essay?
I'm pretty sure he's for it, because when we've talked about his religious perspective before, because he's an Orthodox Christian, he's always trashing Protestantism.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't even know what an Orthodox Christian is.
Part of the idea is that the Protestant Reformation, it led to more pluralistic interpretations of the Bible, which are bad apparently, and it became and one aspect that I kind of agree with is that it made religion more individualistic and rationalistic, and he's more of the community mindset and more of the spiritual and mystic mindset, which I appreciate more. Like, I guess I don't totally have a dog in this fight because I'm basically an atheist, or at least an agnostic atheist anyway. But I just think that these ideas are strange, especially since I know a lot of Protestant Christians and I agree with most aspects of their theological perspective, much more so than this kind of like bashing Protestantism thing. Part of it is like a really traditional sort of small c conservative interpretation of the Bible and wanting to be like old fashioned about the correct ways to view religion and faith and God and stuff like that. Like another example is that apparently the one problem with the Protestant Reformation is that they made the idea of faith, before that, faith was apparently more like a sense, like sight or taste or touch, and the Protestant Reformation made it into more of a concept in language, and apparently that's a bad thing. So it's interesting, and I like learning about theology more since Chief Keef, aka Tim Keefe, got me more interested in philosophy and then theology. So I like having theological discussions with people like Shane who are knowledgeable about philosophy, even if we disagree about things, because it's usually interesting.
Yeah, the only thing I wonder about that take is if that is the case, specifically with that, how far of stretch is it to have a similar take to things outside of religion, saying that this is the correct version of this, or this political party is the correct version?
Yeah.
Because I think when you don't have any type of pluralism, that just leads to more intolerance.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think too. Yeah.
Like, can't you just be okay with these people practicing stuff in a different way? Like, what does that have to do with you specifically?
To be fair, I think that at least Shane's perspective is that, you know, his interpretation is the best way for sure, but it's okay for other people to have their interpretations. They're just wrong. So it's pretty tribalistic, but not authoritarian.
Okay, I guess I get that, but I don't know. Usually, when people act in an authoritarian manner, it's more about whether that they're in the right or in the wrong,
Yeah,
which is
for
why
sure.
it's
Like,
concerning to me.
yeah, like we've talked about how, like you were just mentioning, how bad this gets in politics too, which seems to happen more often than like tribalizing religious disagreement nowadays with social media and all that. And you know, like you were saying, it can range from right wingers claiming that lefties are communists and Marxists to all the way to left wingers claiming that right wingers are literally Nazis, which is almost never the case for anyone.
Yeah. It is for me. Certainty in your belief, for me, is kind of the gateway that leads to authoritarianism,
I
which
agree.
is why I'm not like totally jibing with my way is right and every way that doesn't do it my way is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, how about you just say your way is right for you?
Yeah.
If their way is right for them, so be it.
It's like it's better to, I think, look at like political and religious and philosophical disagreements as more like disagreements over fiction. Like how I made a video yesterday about how Gollum and Sam are the true heroes of Lord of the Rings, and then Tristram and I were like debating about it a little bit, but I'm sure there's no hard feelings from anyone because it's a made up story anyway. And we should treat
Yeah.
that, or treat like political disagreements that way, because they're not quite as fictional, but they are made up stories competing with made up stories that have some tiny aspect of truth to them.
Yeah. That's why I never put my dog into the fight. Like I don't. So that's why I became an independent. I just don't want to have to defend a stupid fucking party for doing stupid shit.
Yeah.
I'd rather just like focus on the policy things that I like and not have to worry about being attached to a party and have to
Mhm.
defend bullshit that party does.
Is it true that you have to register for register for being part of a party or representing it or something in order to vote for that party in the States?
In the primary, if you're voting in the primary, some primaries require you to register with that party.
Oh, okay. You never have to do that in
The-
Canada. You just vote for whoever you think represents you. The
yeah, it also depends on the state because some states don't care if you're registered to vote with the party or not.
Okay. I think that's stupid. That seems unnecessarily tribalistic.
Yeah, but when
And
you're in a primary, you have to remember that these parties are not public entities. Like
oh,
they are private, so they get to decide how they do their shit. So
okay.
some decide that in this state you have to be part of this party to vote in their primary, but
Yeah. You know
not
that
for the general.
it's sad in terms of the political shit. It's only within like the maybe the last few years or so where when there's an election coming up in my uh in where I live here in Fort McMurray or in my province for a provincial election or for a federal election, it only within the last few years have I started like actually watching debates when it's a federal election and actually looking up the different party policies. And it's so important to look at what the actual policies of these parties are when you're going to vote for them, because what they say in their rhetoric is often the total opposite of what their policies are. Like we were talking about with Biden and Kamala Harris, how they pretend to be woke progressives, but really in terms of their policies, they're more like neoliberals. And I find that with Canadian politics too, and just like I kind of see in American politics too, in terms of the policies, like the Democrats and the Republicans in terms of their policies are not really that different, and it kind of almost seems that way very in a very similar way, maybe slightly more so, maybe slightly less so here in Canada in terms of the policies. Like when I was going to vote in the last federal election, I was looking at all the different official party policies, and most of them were pretty similar. It's like disagreement about what percentage of carbon tax or what percentage of immigration there should be. There were very, very few people who were like, let's close all the borders or let's be totally open borders. It was a pretty narrow margin of debate, really, and there was mostly a lot of disagreement on policies. Usually the way that I end up deciding who to vote for is by looking at, okay, so that person or that party, a few of those policies are kind of deal breakers for me. I disagree with a lot of their policies, but they have more policies I agree with than this other party, and that other party has a few deal breakers. So I slightly prefer this party, so I'll vote for that one.
Yeah, I think the problem with, always voting a party is that you have subscribed yourself to all their policies and you really don't have to do any homework.
Yep.
When you're kind of just sitting in the middle and independent, you kind of have to do your homework. That's a problem.
Yep.
Usually for me, I like balance, so I like there to be a balance. I don't like one party to have overwhelming majorities and everything. Problem is, in this day and age, balance is not going to do anything. It's not going to balance. You can get it, but that means that the government is not going to do anything, and they're not going to vote on anything. And I think it's one of the problems is that they get too extreme when they're trying to pass bills and stuff, and there's no compromise, and you get these long, drawn-out fights, and it just becomes detrimental. It's almost thinking that they're thinking.
Oh, uh-oh. Looks like we lost Dusty there. See if he comes back in a second here. I will message him on Facebook here. Yeah, that's true what Dusty was talking about there in terms of like if you just vote based on tribalism. Like I know people who have done that before, and I've done that myself before too. And oh, there's Dusty. Oh, there we go.
No, you can't hear me?
You there, Dusty? Yeah, I can hear you. Lost you for a minute.
Oh yeah, I was just saying, like when they start tying up the government, problem with the parties is they don't work for the American people as a whole, especially in Congress. They only work for the people that elected them, and they kind of ignore everybody else. I get that Biden is trying to do something a little bit different. But if Congress doesn't follow a similar path, then it's just going to be the same shit.
I bet it's probably likely to be that.
Yeah. Because people are going to go nuts over this Georgia thing. So we're just going to wait. I think once the Georgia thing's over, we'll be done with that for a while.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. Freaking politics, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we've talked many times before too about how it's
like fully
interesting
into it.
to.
Let's think
Sorry.
of like the people who actually voted this election on how it was a record-breaking turnout. That just
Oh
shows
yeah,
us how pushed we are from social media to be involved in this shit. Like it's great that more people are participating, but this time around it seems people are participating more because they hate the other side, not because they want something meaningful to happen for everybody. It's
yeah,
like a
for
very,
sure.
very
And it's
divisive
like
election.
it's like a lot of Trump voters are really pro-Trump and really anti-Biden, and I think even more so on the other side. Like Biden's whole platform was, "Hey, I'm not Trump."
I hate Trump.
Yeah,
And apparently that worked.
yeah,
So like I don't like Trump. I think that's a given.
yeah.
I'm not enamored by Biden.
I'm not
I'm
enamored by
definitely going to
either.
be
I think they're both
critical.
awful.
I think they're both awful. I think I was influenced enough by certain people to believe that Trump is just awful for democracy in general. Um,
Yeah,
and then we're kind of seeing that now on how awful for democracy. I also think social media is awful for democracy. I think it's kind of feeling this as well.
for sure.
I think social media made Trump president.
Yeah, he
Um,
definitely used it to his advantage. Like almost his tweets are almost what made him president.
his tweets, just the social media, they can blame themselves for Trump, as for the most part. And I think mainstream news can also blame themselves from Trump
Yeah,
because every little stupid little petty thing he did got way too much coverage. Um, and it was just kind of ridiculous. And Hillary wasn't a good candidate either. Like that election, I did not vote for either of them. So it was just like fucking horrible. These are our selections. Um, no, I'm not voting for Hillary. I'm not voting for Trump.
hmm,
This one, I just thought that Trump was such a threat to democracy, he had to go, and I had to vote for somebody that had a good chance of knocking him out of the presidency. So I did vote for Biden this year. I I took Dan Carlin's advice to heart. It was that and another thing that Kyle had covered. Um, like, did you listen to that Dan Carlin episode, like the last Common Sense episode?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it was about the iceberg, that we are hitting an iceberg.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that one really stirred me towards voting for Biden because he basically endorsed Biden in that last episode.
Mm,
And he made some really good arguments as to why we should vote for them. He also mentioned that he always votes down ticket, but he couldn't in this exception. Um,
what's down ticket mean?
Voting for a third party,
Oh, okay.
like Libertarian or Green or whoever else, write in.
I think if that were me, I probably would have voted down ticket because like both of them, I do slightly prefer Biden to Trump, but both of them have too many policies or at least histories of policies that are deal breakers for me. So I mean, and the way I would look at it, I think, is that I mean, even if I really thought it was extremely important to get Trump out of office, and it arguably is in some ways, like I would think that my one vote I mean, this is the sort of election that people use to not vote, but admittedly, but I would think that my one vote will not make a difference whether Trump or Biden becomes president anyway. Maybe that depends. That probably depends more on whether strategic voting makes more sense in what particular state you're in the states.
Yeah.
I think like I always just have the policy of voting for the person I want to vote for who represents my interests the most, regardless of all other factors. So I probably would have voted for, like, I don't know, maybe Joe Jorgensen for the Libertarian Party, or maybe whoever it was for the Green Party. I'm not sure.
Kanye.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. I said before I might have just troll voted for Kanye. Didn't Kyle Kalinske said that he got 60,000 votes, which is almost.
Yeah. Kyle believes he would have gotten more votes if he ran. Yeah,
I think he
60,000 is pretty
probably would
bad.
have. Yeah.
Well, the main reason I voted for Biden was not because I liked his policies. That's for sure. I voted for Biden because I thought Trump was a legitimate threat to democracy. Like, I am very authoritarian, and he was doing things that really frightened me, and I'm pretty sure frightened libertarians.
One of
And
the things that we were both talking about that Kyle Kalinske made a video about is one of the at least one of the most terrible things that Trump did in his presidency was gassing those protesters so we could go and have a photo op with a Bible in front of a church.
yeah, I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's probably one of the major reasons I had to get him out of office. He was just shitting on the Constitution. Like,
Yeah.
it was
Even
just,
though Biden will probably continue all of these fucked up wars, and they're both just as much war criminals as each other, at least. I think you and I were talking too about how Biden probably would not do that because he cares more about his public perception than Trump does.
that, and he is a constitutional law lawyer, so that means at least he knows what the fuck the Constitution says, unlike
Yeah,
Trump.
yeah.
I think I can be confident that he won't attempt to do anything that violates the Constitution in a major way. Um, yeah, that whole, I don't know, it's just his rhetoric also seems to be more divisive, and it's another major reason that I had to get him out is that I am massively, and I don't want to understate this, I am a hard ass, and I am absolutely massively against the spread of conspiracy theories. Trump is basically our Alex Jones president.
Yeah, he is.
And I was not, I don't think that would, as we could see, just from like the zeitgeist of things, whatever you want to say, yeah, you could say there were liberals overreacted to him.
That's for sure. Yeah.
But hey, if this overreaction extends to people LARPing Civil War in the streets, then let me just get this fuckhead out of here and let's get a more calming presence. You know, I don't want to have to worry about tweets. I want the media to cover more significant and meaningful things that have nothing to do with Trump's hair or his supposed racism and, you know, all the other bullshit that really doesn't matter much. I guess I don't want to go into the racism thing because I basically think everybody's racist to some degree, which is why I don't really care about the racist call outs. But I just hope, one, it's going to be hard on the media. And I'm really looking for that reformation. They're not going to have a Trump to beat up. What are they going to do? What's going to happen
They
to
always
them?
find ways to be tribal.
They do, but I want to see this. I want to see like the reckoning. You guys don't have a Trump anymore. What the fuck are you guys going to do? Like, give me some real news.
Yeah.
I don't want any more like divisive bullshit. One other fear I have is that they're not going to cover Biden with as much scrutiny that they did Trump.
I bet especially like the more left-leaning mainstream media.
Yeah, media. What's mainstream media? Like missionary
that's
sex
what
and
is that like?
just missionary.
Porn sites that are based that are more official, like
They
I don't know,
only
Reddit
show
or
you
something.
they only show you there's no threesomes. It's only missionary. It's just the straight cold hard facts.
Yeah,
The mainstream media. Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of interested in what's going to happen. Now, the interesting thing is one of the shows I have here playing 24/7, or at least channels, is Bloomberg, and it's like the most boring fucking news channel I've ever watched.
even more
And the
than
reason,
C-SPAN.
well, I don't even consider C-SPAN a news channel. They just cover Congress shit.
Okay.
No, there's no opinion shows on here. It's just straight up news and financial bullshit and stuff that's like kind of really boring, and that's kind of how news should be. Shouldn't be like, oh, it shouldn't be like you're watching the wrestling or a reality TV show. It should just be delivering the facts of the day, and then you're trying to discern, make decisions based off of what you're being shown. So I wonder what's going to happen with CNN and all them, and
But they're
MSNBC.
going to go back to like standard behavior, like saying favorable things about Biden, and
Well, it's
and then
basically what I'll
Fox
have to
News
do.
will criticize him.
Well, the thing it's just going to make me do is I know this is going to happen, is I'm just going to have to pay attention to more conservative media while Biden's in office.
Yeah.
I didn't have to this time around because Trump was in office. Like, I did pay attention to both, but I put more emphasis on the side that was more critical of who's in power.
Yeah.
When it comes to Biden, it's likely that I will be consuming a little bit more a right of center content. Stuff that's just going to be a bit more critical of Biden, because I don't want to miss out like I did in the Obama years, even though I wasn't at all political. I didn't learn about any of his scandals until a couple of years ago. And that's just because the media as a whole didn't really cover them extensively.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say the media, I'm not just talking about the news, folks. We're talking about all of media. We're talking about your late night TV shows, your talk shows, your any shows. They weren't talking about Obama's scandals. In the Trump era, we got to see Trump scandals. We saw it on Saturday Night Live. We saw them on all the various late night shows, and your daytime talk shows all talked about Trump and his bullshit. I'm guessing that's not going to happen with Biden, but the problem
I
is
was
we
just
still
gonna
need to know
I was just
what's.
gonna ask you about that. Like, I would say that it's probably likely to happen less with Biden. But do you think that like social media has changed it to make politicians in general more transparent? so that it's easier to, and scandals are more prone to be leaked because people are obsessed with them on social media, which might be a good thing for presidents in general. What do you think about that?
Well, I say yes and no, and this is why. Because I remember all the Bush scandals. And the reason I remember the Bush scandals, and I didn't watch news back then, is because there are a bunch of Bush scandals talked about in the places I described, Saturday Night Live, your late night talk shows, and your daytime talk shows. They were all talking about Bush's scandals. So I don't think it's particularly a social media thing. I do see that media, like the mainstream media as a whole, have avoided talking about Democratic scandals.
Right.
So that's what I worry about. So yeah, it's worrying. It's worrying because people have to scrounge for information to find out more about left-wing scandals. What's also worrying is the places that we have to go to find out about those scandals, because sometimes they make up non-existing bullshit scandals. Like in the Obama years, we had scandals about him wearing a tan suit. Just stupid bullshit like that. So we'll see, man. I just got to readjust how I view. It seems like anytime a certain party is in power in the executive office, I have to readjust how I consume media just to make sure that I'm getting
It's a good
information.
idea to do that too.
So yeah, it just means I'm going to have to get a little more right just to find out what Biden's doing wrong. And that's just how it goes. Either that or I have to rely. Well, the good thing is I can at least rely on Kyle to point out all that shit because he's quite critical of Democrats.
And Jimmy Dore even more so.
Oh yeah, he's very critical of Democrats. So I could always listen to them, and then they will probably do the job I need. Because I don't really know anyone on the right who would be super factual without injecting like weird conspiracy bullshit. I guess Fox is starting to come around to adhere to more factual information.
I can think
Except when we're dealing with Hannity. Hannity is just a propaganda machine in itself.
I didn't think of a few people like Glenn Lowry, who's kind of conservative. He does a podcast, and he's fairly right leaning, but also very reasonable and very fact oriented, and he's like a data oriented economist. And I guess a little like the comedian Dave Smith, who's a libertarian. Well, I think he's actually like an anarcho-capitalist
That's interesting. Like Dave Smith was on Rogan, and I was like, he's not going all out anarcho here. He's super reasonable in this podcast.
Himself. But I think he's good for criticizing the Democrats too, because he often criticizes he makes it clear often that he doesn't like the right or the left, but he's often more critical of the left than the right, and slightly more favorable to more right-leaning views than left-wing ones.
Yeah, like I listened to the podcast with Rogan recently that Dave Smith did. I was like, man, he's not digging hard into that crazy anarcho-capitalist stuff.
He sounded more reasonable to me than he ever does on his own podcast.
Yeah, maybe Rogan mellows him out a bit. So I guess he doesn't want to get much pushback because Joe will push back if he's comfortable with you. If he's not comfortable, he's not going to do it. Like Kanye didn't push back on him at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. Yeah, I was like, man, Dave Smith is sounding really reasonable right now.
Yeah, I know.
But I did sense his libertarianness there, but he wasn't going like super hard into like the anarcho utopia, which is exactly what it sounds like to me. The anarcho utopia.
Well, I mean, actually, to be fair, when I've heard him and Michael Malice talk about, and Malice is more of an anarchist than an anarcho-capitalist. They usually, when they talk about that, they basically say that this idea of that anarchists and anarcho-capitalists and libertarians believe about like a lawless or anarchist or almost that way society, that they believe that it's going to be utopia. They claim that it's a straw man usually, and that at least people like themselves don't think that it'll be a utopia, but they think it'll be at least slightly better than democracy, which I don't see at all, but you know, they do.
Yeah, I just don't get like the enforcement mechanism. Like, how do you enforce a just society if you can't enforce it? Because I know a lot of it is not based off of enforcing anything.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest problem I had. Because in order to have a just society, you have to have a solid justice system. And if you can't have a justice system that everyone can agree upon, I don't know how you're going to have a just society. As an anarcho-capitalist society, they decide their own justice. It's like, what if your justices aren't compatible? Then you go to war. That's what happens.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I think that, I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but I think people like Dave Smith and what Michael Malice, what they might say about that is that that's what that's what should happen because it's better than a larger scale war between countries or something like that too. Because they seem, especially Dave Smith, actually both of them seem pretty pro segregation too. Like if people disagree fundamentally, then segregate themselves.
By force?
That's a good
Like
question.
that's like
I think they mean voluntary segregation, which seems hard.
that's the problem with voluntary. Like
Yeah,
that just doesn't make sense. Like anyone can voluntarily desegregate themselves from another party, but you can't. How do you force somebody from not interacting with you? You have to use force.
yeah.
it's
And
that's
like
why.
that's the sort of ironic thing about libertarians too, because they're against enforcement of things, but they're for enforcement if you enforce things yourself, because they're like really pro gun too. So I'm pro freedom. I'm against enforcement unless someone comes on my property or tries to take my stuff, then I have the right to use my gun and threaten them with it or something like that.
Yeah, but what if they declare to themselves that your stuff is theirs?
Well, you know,
Sue,
property
people sue each other over that shit all the time.
rights
What do you
do.
think's going to
Yeah,
happen without the justice system?
people will kill each other over property disputes in an anarchist or anarcho-capitalist society because there won't be any laws enforcing who's.
Well, there's no collective law enforcement. Like, if you can't, if you don't have a democracy that decides what is to be done, then how do you do it? Like, I understand, like when they come from, they're talking about like the origin of the United States as a nation and how people had to rely on each other to survive in a very simple and small communities. That's not how shit works anymore. You can't just drop that kind of sensibility in the middle of New York City and think that's going to work.
And like
Um,
that's another problem with social media too, right? Like if you if you try to go back to smaller, more segregated, like almost feudal societies, they like I don't see how that's going to work when people with social media communicate with people all over the world, and that could mean like, hey, I went into this area with people of a different political persuasion today. Can you believe all the bullshit was happening? And then it could very quickly through social media be like, okay, we're in this camp here. Let's go, like you were saying, let's go to war with this camp here because they have the wrong ideas and there's no one stopping us from doing so.
Yeah, it's almost like the libertarians are trying to be like the Amish or something, like off in their
Yeah.
own little enclaves and have their own little rules. Like, yeah, I guess you guys can go ahead and do that stuff, but I don't know. You can't run an entire society off of that.
Mhm.
They're just not going to be happy. I don't know. It's just kind of, and then I remember like that the arguments, or at least the last time Ruben showed up on on uh on Rogan, I was like, man, this is embarrassing. And it's always like, what?
Post office can replace regulations like for buildings and stuff, and text can too. Or wait, no,
Yeah,
like get rid of the post office and cell phone videos can replace the need for building regulations and building codes.
yeah, that's funny because I'm thinking of anarcho-capitalism, and I'm also thinking of what could anarcho-capitalism do against people like Google and Facebook and social media. They do absolutely zero, and then Facebook would eventually find out a way to manipulate the libertarians into doing their bidding. So
Mhm.
it's like good luck. Good luck with
And
that.
and even people like Dave Smith, who we mentioned, for example, he's sympathetic to the argument of breaking up the social media companies, even though he knows that's against like libertarian principles. He's sympathetic to that, but he doesn't have a real solution for that because there wouldn't be a good libertarian one for that. So like in an anarcho-capitalist society, what are you going to do with greedy corporations and shit like that? Like libertarians and anarcho-capitalists seem to think that's not going to be a problem, but I mean, to me, in my opinion, it's not the case that government is more prone to corruption than corporations, or corporations are more prone to corruption than government, as people get tribal about these perspectives. I think they're like roughly equally prone to corruption, and maybe the unification of corporations and government is bad, but like just a massive authoritarian government with no corporations, or just massive corporations with no government, I don't think that would be any better.
Yeah, I just think most political philosophies that are kind of like, I don't know, I call them one-trick ponies. So with libertarianism, we're talking about extreme freedom. With
And
the right, we're talking about what would the right be considered? I just traditional values, like socially and economically, it would be to cut spending on government spending. And the left, we're talking about uh, to have more freedom, to have more freedom from the government, but also try to have more equality between everybody. So I think it's just a balance that needs to be stricken between these things. Like, we still need people to be able to make money for themselves and do good for themselves. But we also need to make sure that the bad actors in capitalism are put in check by the government. Like,
mhm,
we need regulations for shit. Like, I'm not going to be anti-regulation. It just seems too simplistic and ideological to think that all regulations should be done away with.
mhm.
And the same thing with, it's too simplistic to think that everything should be regulated.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
there has to be like a pretty good balance that people can agree on, and you can only agree on things and talk about things if you have some type of system that allows you to do so. I just think an anarcho-capitalistic system totally doesn't give people a system to use to actually form these type of institutions. It's just I just think that that perspective lacks any type of balance, and it's too simplistic for me. It's like the human social interactions are too complex to try to group them in these very rigid like political ideologies.
Definitely, definitely. It's like it's putting people into these same groups, into uh, these same groups, and seeing them as like, okay, this is what's going to work best for them. Well, really, like there are probably multiple different solutions that will work depending on the group of people we're talking about, the time of history, their location, innumerable other factors. It's not like we're going to solve this problem by regulating it out of existence, or we're going to totally solve this problem by eliminating all regulations, or like you can look at this debate about police brutality, for example. You can go all the way from one end of the spectrum to from abolish police, which won't fucking work at all, and that's a stupid idea, all the way to like the complete opposite, which is
Good morning.
like a fascist like a fascist militarized government, which already there is some corporatization and militarization of the police for sure, but that is bad and should be reduced in my opinion, but that doesn't mean that the solution is to totally get rid of police. It's it's so stupid.
The abolish police position isn't a widely popular one or adopted. It's just like this super fringe position, and then that's the straw man that pretty much gets attacked by the right. It's just
Yeah.
we're gonna just see all these straw men being thrown at each other, and that's pretty ridiculous. All right, man. So it's almost 3 o'clock here. You want to start wrapping it up?
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah, we went super off topic. Let's go ahead and rate the movie. I think I gave my rating. What was your rating?
Yeah, I'd give it 2 thumbs up too. We were rating it out of 5 stars like they do on Goodreads, I'd probably give it 4 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, I think it's pretty important, especially for parents that have children. And for those people that don't have kids, it's just pretty mindful of what these companies are doing and like the negative aspects of those. It's like being told that smoking is bad for your health. It's basically teaching you that, hey, social media isn't especially good for your health, and you should probably know that. But I don't know. It's like even when you're smoking and you're told that some people might have an effect, some people may not. Some people may already be too far gone.
Yep.
But it looks like society in general has been trending towards less smokers than more smokers.
True.
So maybe if this message spreads, we'll eventually get to a place where we see that more of society sees social media as, in its current iteration, I would say maybe it changes in the future, but in its current iteration, it seems that it does cause quite a bit of harm.
Mm-hmm. This is an interesting question I was thinking about. In the film, a few of the experts offer like different possible, well, not solutions, but things that they would wish for. There's that guy Jaron Lanier.
We didn't even talk about that guy.
Yeah, he's like
Describe him.
he's like he's in AI and he's like this big fat guy with dreadlocks and a big like beard, and he thinks that everyone should totally get off of social media. So like I kind of think that you know, social media is safe if you have more moderation in it, if even though that can be difficult, but he thinks that like people should just leave social media. What do you think about that?
I would take the happy middle. I think people should take extended breaks from it. I think people should at least dedicate a day of the week to not be on it. I think it would be much healthier. It's like junk food.
It is.
You got to treat social media like junk food for your brain.
It
might.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good every once in a while, but you don't want to have a diet, like a junk food diet. I just consider a lot of the people QAnon and you know crazy Antifa people to be on a complete junk food diet of social media. It's like that's how, and just to think of ISIS. Like I know that was one of the things that they didn't really specifically talk about, but do you know how many people got into ISIS because of social media?
Yeah. Yep.
It was a big thing that allowed them to recruit people.
That's for sure, yeah.
So yeah, I just think people should treat Facebook and Twitter like mental junk food. And sometimes they just got to realize that that's what they're consuming. And if they consume too much of it, it's not really going to be good for them in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well said. Like it's good, like you were saying, it's okay to have it in small bursts, but if you binge on it, it's really bad for your health, just like junk food.
Yeah, so that's the kind of message I've been doing lately. Like usually on people's posts, in order to quell partisan hatred, I say, hey, this is part of what social media does to people. And you know, try to examine that aspect of it instead of trying to demonize people. It's like what type of information that you're being fed and things of that nature. It's just sometimes if this is just riling you up and getting you angry, there's more important things in the world to think about. Like just think about things that are immediately close to you. And so why am I going to be pissed off about shit that's happening in Seattle when I don't live there or live anywhere near there?
Yeah.
Like I'll get mad about local stuff. You know, it's happening in my own neighborhood. I don't live in Seattle. Why do I care about crazy ass Antifa people in the streets in Seattle? Like, I don't live there, man. If that's how they're choosing to live their lives in that neck of the woods, then so be it.
Yeah, for sure. And like that makes the most sense. It's like that's why like I've said before, I think the only newspaper I read is my local one, because that's the most important news, because it's what affects me the most.
Well, unfortunately, my local newspaper is the Washington Post, so I really just kind of rely on the news stations, the local news stations here. So I don't really have an alternate, like an actual local newspaper here, because Washington Post is more like a national paper.
Right.
So, yeah, I have to rely on my local. And every night during dinner, we watch local news. That's how we kind of stay informed of what's happening around us. And the funny thing is like we see the news reporters out and about on the channel, and we're like, hey, we were there like 5 minutes ago. We didn't see that news reporter there.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, look, they're like a block away. I bet if we ran there right now, we could like wave our arms and we'll be on TV, because the actual like City Hall is a block away from us. So there's all those like reporters down there like reporting. So one of these days we're like, hey, if we catch the 4 o'clock news and we see that they're doing live reporting there at the government center, we can probably run down there and we'll see ourselves at 5 o'clock when they do
That's
the
cool.
next news reports. But yeah, the news reporters are around my area like all the time.
Cool.
And that's cool. So that means, hey, they're telling me literally what's happening a block away from me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good, man. Yeah.
But yeah, just try to pay attention to local issues. Try not to worry about Antifa LARPing in like a city across the other side of the country.
Mm-hmm. And for me,
Antifa LARPing or Proud Boy LARPing, either
yeah.
or.
And for me, like I was talking with you and Chris about last week, the American news is not even in my country, so that's why I try to look at it as much of sports as I can, because it's mostly entertainment.
Yeah, mostly. That's right, man.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, we rate this as a quite good documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And I will continue to push it to friends and family and other people on social media because I think everybody needs to watch this thing.
Me too.
All right, so I guess it's sign off time.
All right.
I'll
Yeah.
just say, everybody, watch Mixed Mental Arts by going to our group and just checking things out. Like and subscribe to the Mixed Mental Arts channel if you ever find yourself seeing us do like our discussions there. And I think the next thing we're going to do is it was a movie, right?
Oh yeah. Wasn't the next the next Mixed Mental Arts one we were gonna do was gonna be, I think it was gonna be maybe starting Crown of Swords.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah, we
or
can start Crown of Swords.
yeah.
Because I
And
am already good enough to do that.
yeah. All right.
So, and that's, if you don't know what Crown of Swords is, everybody, that's book 7 in the Wheel of Time. I can't believe we're already halfway there.
Yep. 7 out of 15 books, including New Spring.
Yeah, and we covered New Spring, so we're kind of at book 8, I guess, ish. So, yeah, we're almost there, man.
Yeah.
Halfway there, at least.
Yep.
Getting into the juicy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and check out our other chats on Mixed Mental Arts about the other books so far too. And check out Mixed Mental Arts on Patreon.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And yeah, so I'll just say all the stuff I like to say at the end here. Also, yeah, coming up soon on Mindgasms, I've got a few podcasts planned for next week. Going to talk with Chris James about Kamala Harris and how awful she is, at least for the most part, and going to do that chat I mentioned, that sort of theological discussion / debate with Shane about whether the Protestant Reformation ruined Christianity, and then also next week, I believe a week from today, you, Chris, Shizan, and I were going to do a movie chat about From Dusk Till Dawn. That I know it's a little late, but I wanted to watch him and talk about a movie like that in honor of Halloween. And it's probably my favorite vampire movie. Perhaps maybe tied with Blade, but it's definitely one of my 2 favorites at least. So yeah, all that's coming up. And like I always say at the end of these, thanks to everyone for watching this episode. Hope you enjoyed it, and definitely check out that documentary, Social Dilemma. It's very educational and important to know how we're all being manipulated and turned against each other by social media. And thanks to those of you who subscribe to my channel, click the like button on this video, comment on it, click that bell for to be notified when I put out new videos. And thanks especially to those of you who give me money on Patreon, which I always greatly appreciate. And I'll put the link in the description of this video for that. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all. All right. And also, groove is in the heart. And so spread love, mindgasms, groove, and funk everywhere, and warnings about social media. And, you know, because we all know people, and probably every one of us have been addicted to social media and to our phones and everything like that from time to time. So it's important to at least try to moderate it so that we can kind of have a more psychologically healthy culture where we can talk to people about things, which is really important. And yeah, I guess you already kind of said your last thoughts there on the documentary right there, Dusty.
Yep. Just like and subscribe Mindgasms and hit that bell, guys.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Well, thanks again to everyone, and adios.